Hello. Srijan, are you here?
Yeah, I am here, but I can't see you, Neil.
Just a second. My video is on.
Your virtual background is kind of.
Oh shit, that's messed up. Oh, hello.
I need.
Hi everyone, it's great to have you guys here. It's a perfect size of a small group we were expecting. My name is Neil. I'm a lawyer and I work with Devfolio as his chief of staff. And we have Srijan here with us today.
Yep, I'll myself introduce. So to give you a little bit background about me, what I do, I'm Srijan. I work with this early stage startup called Clarisights as a chief of staff as well, where we help enterprise marketing teams build a single source of truth for all of their marketing data. We work with some of the world's largest brands like Delivery Hero, HelloFresh, World Remit, etc. So yeah, super excited to be here and share whatever little I know about hiring and how to apply to startups. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just get started. I'll just share my screen just so we have some context. Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
So you want to start?
Sure. We'll probably start. So again, just to give a little bit context, whatever I share here, right, it's very, very biased working with Clarisights, which is a very early stage startup and have grown from what 5-member team to a 30-member team. And I have been primarily involved in tech hiring, which is basically engineering. So all of my thoughts are a little biased towards that. And yeah, I would also like to share learnings from both perspective, being a candidate myself before applying to engineering roles, and also being a recruiter now and hiring for engineering roles, right? So I would be very, very happy to share those learnings. As you can already see, the first point which I wanted to personally talk about was the company, candidate, and the culture fit. So from a company's point of view, right? What, there are a few things which companies also need to look for why are a candidate is looking for a change, right? You need to understand why a candidate would want to join you, and how does a candidate decide to join a company, right? Usually, it is whenever. Like before joining a company, a candidate usually either talks to their friends, sometimes their family, or I have even seen folks making a spreadsheet, right, to understand what their needs are and understanding if those needs are being made, right? And these needs could be very, very different, but there are few specific needs which people usually tend to look for, and these needs could be things like impact, right? If the candidate is currently having an impact which he or she is able to see it at her current role, right? Both in terms of personal impact, but also if their work is impacting um, their work, right? If their work is impacting the company goals, right? If they can clearly see their work being impacted and making that company move forward. So impact is really one of the big things. The other one is challenges. If the candidate or if the person is feeling challenged enough, if they are working on hard challenges, if there are hard problems to solve or not. Usually this is the most valid reason, or this is the most used reason which candidates also talk about, that they feel that they're not being challenged, right? The growth has been stagnant. So that is also another perspective. The other thing is growth, right? And growth and challenges kind of are very. It feels that they are very closely related, but to be very, very honest, it's usually not the same, right? By growth, what I mean is, if the person is able to gain new skills, right, gain new experience or gain new knowledge, right? For example, some folks repeatedly want to dive deep into one sector of a problem, but there are also folks who wants to always try out new things, right? For example, there is a front-end engineer who has been working on front-end, but now he wants to go and dive deep into the, say, back-end, right? So there are different perspectives towards these things, and the company needs to understand that perspective as well. So that is another part of it that they need. The other could be their status, right? Their job title and what is the compensation they would be getting from the company, right? So that's also something which company needs to think about when they are going and hiring for a new role or looking for new candidates. And finally, I think it's also about the team, who the candidate would be working with, right? Do they feel very, very comfortable about it? Do they want to work with these folks? Do they think that those folks could be their mentors or something along those lines, right? So major things which companies need to think about when they are hiring. So that's a perspective from a recruiter, right? Okay, these are the things you tend to look for in the candidate as well. These are the things you kind of ask them while you're interviewing them. And finally, about the culture, right? Usually in startups, the value alignment, or I would say the culture fit, is also very, very important. And by value alignment, what I mean is both the company and the candidate should have similar perspectives about how they see, how they want to work, right? What their work styles are. If the mission and the vision of the company correlates with the candidate, that's extremely, extremely important when you're joining an early stage startup, right? For example, say when you're faced with difficulties, right, both from company perspective and the candidate perspective, if there is not a culture fit, you usually tend to either feel not good enough, you feel that your decisions have been traded upon you, and you are not the one who are taking these decisions. So having that right fit on the values are also very, very important when you are applying to an early stage startup or even a startup, right? So I think these are the few things which the company look for in a candidate when they're looking out for a new role. Right, Neil? Do you want to add something on this?
No, I think you pretty much summed it up. So I think Srijan's given a great background into what goes into the decision of hiring, how companies look at candidates when they want to hire somebody who is the right fit. And so once I think a candidate has figured this, candidate and the company, and like when it's a candidate has figured out what the specific company they want to apply to, once those basics are met, I think then you enter into the step of how do you get your foot in? Like how do you reply to a hiring call, or how do you put in an application, even if it's a cold email or it's if you're replying to some call, the way you do it also matters. It doesn't matter what you are, it also matters how you do it, because like startups have very low attention spans. So they're going to and India has too many people applying for too many jobs. So it's always important for companies to, like, everybody develops these ways, they figure out the signals from all the noise that they see in their hiring, in their HR inboxes. So every step of the way, when you're writing in what you're saying, what you're linking, how you're talking, how you're writing, the previous things you built, everything, like the company is going to look at everything and it's going to take a quick call. So it's pretty important to make sure that the execution of all of this is like just under, like, almost as good as possible. It has to be perfect if you want to actually successfully get to the last stage of the hiring. So I think now we'll dive in deep into a few of these actionable points and why each of them are more important. So we'll dive in, but just before that, I think webinar is sort of is not the best what you wanted to use for this event. So free to turn your cameras on, unmute yourself, ask questions whenever we're changing slides. Like, we want to make this as interactive as possible, so just don't wait for the end. It's pretty chill, then that's how it was going to be. Okay. Be a user. So I'll just give my basic intro to this point and then Srijan can take over. When you're applying to a company, it's very important to understand the company in the first place. And a lot of the signals that companies look for in the hiring process have to do with what you can actually add on to this. And a very necessary piece of adding on to something is understanding what it actually is right now. And the best way to understand a product or understand the company is to be a user. And of course, there's a lot of times it's not possible. Like if it's a B2B business and you're just a normal person, chances are that there's no way you can actually be on the customer side of the company. So then in this situation, you just have to improvise and see if you can read about the products, if you can read a few reviews. They don't have to be positive reviews, just so that you can like replicate the same thing in your interview. It can even be a negative review to show the company that you know what's wrong and how you can fix it. A lot of these creative solutions and a lot of these creative hacks you use to get your foot inside revolves around you demonstrating that you have what it takes to solve their problems. And a company, of course, has problems. That's why they need somebody else in. And you are the problem solver, so you need to know what the problems are. So, in sense, that's the simple thing I say a lot. So try to like the products you use the most. So try to apply like if openings at these companies, you might be a better fit just right off the bat. But if they're not, you try to think like a user. Put your like in whatever way, try to put your feet into the user shoes and see what's going on there, how it works, what's wrong, what's right.
Absolutely, totally agreed, Neil. Right. For example, as you mentioned about B2B, and Clarisights is completely B2B, a startup, right? And most of the times people don't get what we're trying to build, right? But what you could actually do is you can actually go and research about the company. You can see what they're trying to build. For example, our end user is a performance marketer, right? A marketing person. So you could actually go and see if you can talk to a marketer, understand if this actually is a problem, and get as much as context before you go on the first call or before you even reach out to the company that, okay, I'm interested in this job. So as much as information you can get about the company before applying you would have more and more advantage when you go and apply for that role. Totally agreed there.
Yeah, so these are the basic things that just put you at a high percentile even before process. Pretty important. Lots of good.
Is any, I guess Neil.
So of course. Something wrong?
I was not able to hear you. I don't know if it was only me.
No worries. I'll just go ahead again. There are two parts to this. You need to have a lot of good side projects to showcase them well. Regardless of how you do, if it's with something that goes, it's conveyed to the company, like itni mehnat ka koi fayda nahi ho. There's no point of you doing so much if you can't get it across. So of course we come to communication skills later also, but something about that works pretty well in at least in like early stage startups. And we are on builder, so that gives us a deeper insight into the person. But what startups are actually looking for is people who are self-learners and self-starters. So and most of the times doing a lot of side projects, so what you're not taught in college, learning that on your own, making something out of it, and doing that over a prolonged period of time signals to the company that you have what it takes to. Hello, I'm sorry, I just got a lot of messages. Is my voice lagging? I just fix this.
Yes.
For a while.
Yeah, sure. Can you stop your video? I think that's the bigger problem. I think if you stop your video, I guess the audio should work.
Okay.
Yeah, this is much better, I guess.
Yeah. So as I said, so startups are like in most early stage startups, the team size is small, and companies don't want to micromanage. At least most early stage startups in our world don't want to micromanage. So you want people who can understand the problem, who can see what has to be done. So in most companies, at least I'll just speak for Devfolio at the moment. All engineers are also like mini product managers. You need to understand the product. You need to see what's wrong. You need to know how to fix it, and then is the main job when you actually have to go and fix it. So in all of this process, you can't have somebody micromanaging and having constant oversight over you all the time. So we want people who always who show the signals of them having done these sort of things before, different parts of the, like, a company has multiple parts and a product also has multiple parts. So somebody who's explored these sort of things from different angles gives us like at least hints to us that they know how these complex companies work. Like, a company is basically a lot of small projects that could possibly be only projects put together in a well-oiled machinery that makes money. So if we think that you know a few of these pieces which are otherwise projects, it gives us a lot of insight into how much value you can add to the company.
Very, very true. And here it's also very important to understand what are the projects which are important, right? You don't need to add all of your projects which you have worked on. So depending upon the kind of companies you're applying to, you kind of change your projects as well, right? Be as much as contextual as you can, right? And as Neil pointed out, right? If you are applying at a startup, there is always a need for someone else, right? There always are problems. So you just need to figure out where you could add an impact and then kind of personalize your profile and then reach out to them. So yeah, totally agree.
Srijan is beginning to open source. Do you want to take this up first?
Yeah, absolutely. I said, right, open source, if you're applying for an engineering role, I think open source contributions are a very, very, very positive sign, right? And this also helps for the companies to directly look at your code, right? Because if you have contributed to open source, already so many people are using your product, right? Or it's already in production. So it's a very positive sign. And at Clarisights, we really, really appreciate it. And most of the times, if a candidate has contributed to open source, we even tend to skip one technical round because that's the most positive sign. But also here, I also want to add, like, you need to be sure which project you're contributing to. At start, it's okay to contribute to any project, but you need to go and dive deeper into if this project is technically hard enough, right? There are a lot of open source projects which do not really add value. So you need to figure out, okay, if this project is actually adding value to your profile, if you are learning something new, right? Just fixing a spelling is not really an open source contribution. You really need to understand that, okay, you are putting some real value to your contribution, right? So that's something really, really important. Not every open source contribution is valuable. You need to figure out, okay, which is the project I should contribute to, which could have more impact, right? For example, if you're contributing to really technical core projects, like say languages, programming languages, Ruby, React.js, or something like that, it has a different level of impact when you are, for example, contributing to say a different project, right? Say Fourth Asia, for example. Not really, but see, if the more technical you go, the more impact you would have. So that's what I try to do. Got it. Do you want to add something on this, Neil?
Yeah. So, like, again, they're just putting some extra emphasis on relevance. So what companies usually want, what we usually want, is we want somebody who's T-shaped. So you need to, like, what a lot of projects shows us is that you mastered multiple parts of the entire cycle. But we need to see what we have to put extra focus on is what is the most relevant projects. How do you develop the most relevant skills for this particular job? So it's not one thing that we don't, for most sort of jobs, it's not something that you need to know this thing, and as long as you're really good at this, that's all we need. It has to be sort of you need to have some broader expertise over multiple things also. So always.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Another point which I completely forgot to add before was, for example, like open source programs like GSOCs, different women open source programs are also really, really impactful on your profile, right? What you could also see is you can always see companies what are the tech stack they are using, and see if there are open source projects which they are using, and if you can contribute to that. For example, me personally, I always reach out to folks who have contributed to similar tech stack which we use. For example, we internally heavily use Postgres, so I have actually literally went to the contributors of the Postgres and individually reached out to them and see if they would want to join Clarisights, right? So you can do that, right? You can see if you can do that. That would be that impact would be very, very high. For example, when you're directly contributing to a project which is internally being used by the company. You're on mute, Neil.
This sort of like it's not as important. It just goes to, so personal profile websites are overrated. So it's, of course, it's not as important as the rest of the points, but I think it drives the point home that too many people focus on, while applying, you focus too much on the form of how things look. You focus too much on how your application looks, how you are portrayed on the internet, how your website looks, and of course, like I remember a few years ago, this had a lot of value when personal portfolio websites were not as common. Now, like maybe 90% of the profiles we receive have with the personal portfolio have almost the same 3-4 templates. You get these sort of templates free with the GitHub student developer package, and we know so that like just the making of the personal portfolio isn't a project anymore. So what I'm basically trying to say is don't focus too much on posturing. Don't focus too much on how your profile looks. Focus on what is inside the profile. Like if it's a good profile, we're going to like if we and anything you see, we're going to have a cursory look for sure. So if we see things that are relevant, of course we're going to dive into it as deep as possible. So don't worry too much about how your personal portfolio looks. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to have you just have to have a simple list of what you've done. Just show it to us. It's perfect. I think this is one of the places where even a more conventional CV also seems to work, because when you focus just on an A4 white PDF, we know that there's no flash distracting us. You go directly to the project section, you go directly to experience, you go onto the links, directly go on to what you've done, focus on the things you've built, and not on these other flashy parts.
Yeah. Even a text file does, right? For example, I don't know if you know about Patrick Collison. Patrick Collison just have a txt file on patrickcollison.com, right? So it does not matter how it looks. Of course, if you're applying for a role like designing, it really matters there. But for example, if you're applying for an engineering role, it surely doesn't. If you can just send a txt file, it would work. Totally.
Yeah, so I think the basic rule of thumb is if your personal portfolio is a big project that you've done and is something you want to specifically showcase, then it's really important, because it goes to like drive another sort of point home. But otherwise, I think they're sort of over focused upon these days.
Yeah.
Clear communication. So I think this is one of the most important things right now, because as I started off at the first point, you can get everything right, but if the person reading your email doesn't get these points, then I think you'll be filtered out at that moment itself at most companies. Anything you do first has to be shown properly. And what clear communication stems out of usually is clarity in your own head. If you know what company you're applying for and why you're applying for those companies, then then it helps you focus on the most important parts. And clear communication is only one bit. Clarity, as I said, clarity is I would say the more important part. If you know this is the company and why you're applying to it, if you know this is the role, why you're applying for it, if you know why you are the best person, if you're sort of making up reasons for why you're the best person for the job, you're most likely to have some random blurb there which we can't figure out. So if you actually know these things, if you ask these questions to yourself honestly and figure out the answers to them before you write the mail just automatically becomes much better. And one very important thing here is where clarity also comes into play is where when you know what company you're applying to, it enables you to contextualize and personalize that email. Everybody wants people who are really into the company they're applying to. If we can very easily tell what application has been sent to 20 other companies in the exact same form, that just shows that you're playing like a darting portfolio theory where you're just going with 10 tukkas and you're hoping one just sticks. But it's actually much more easier. Like now on the recruiter end, I can like pretty confidently say that it's very easy from our end to know what you just had saved, and even if you just replace the command F, command R, just replace the company name and just send it to us. So like, of course, don't make typos, like don't make mistakes in replacing the words, but also change the content. See why you're like, make it personal, not about, when personal doesn't only mean the recruiter and you and your personal connection that you met at a conference. Even that is fine, I guess. But more about your talk about that company, why contextualize your skills and why it specifically matters more to that company and why you specifically matter more for the company.
Yeah, but what exactly, Neil? Totally agree with you. For example, whenever you are applying or reaching out direct, for example, if you are even writing a cold email, right? Doing enough research about the company gives you so much heads up, and the chances of getting a reply is so much higher that you can't even expect, right? I'm pretty sure that if you write a good cold email with enough research, everyone would reply you. Undoubtedly, every single person in the startup ecosystem, if you have written a good cold email with enough research, they will surely reply. You make it or not, that's another problem. But you will 100% get a reply. You will get to a call with the company. Right? That's what you want. So totally agreed there. So one thing which I also want to add there, right? While you're doing research, what you can also do is you can figure out who is the right person to reach out to, right? Usually start, it's very easy to find out who's the person taking care of hiring, right? You don't always need to reach out to the founder. You can also reach out to the engineer there, right? Like, okay, I was researching about Clarisights. What are the things you're working on? Is this something you want to add me give more context to me, right? And I am pretty sure that most of the folks will give you more and more content, right? So always try to get as much as context before you try to apply. If you're applying randomly at 10 companies, the chances of you getting in is way lower than just applying at one with enough research. So first is to make sure that you're reaching out to the right person. Don't The second is to don't write everything on your first email. Be very on point, that okay, you saw that okay, you are doing this and this. I can see that I can add value here. This is my little background. Here is my CV. That's it. And you'll I'm pretty sure that the chances of your replies get very high.
Yeah, like just on a segue there on a on a personal note. So one hack I used to use is this is even more true for bigger companies, that the CEO, the person who is like more popularly known, is bombarded with cold emails and press requests and everything left and right. So just a very simple hack, even with like something that does not take too much research or finding out. Just if you're an engineer, write to the CTO. Like just find the whoever is
Yep.
closer, rank 2, rank 3, rank 4, anywhere in the C-suite. They the chances are they receive like 20% of the emails in total, and that one founder, that one popular CEO receives 80% of all incoming emails. I think that's also generous. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure it's going to be like 95.
True.
So that's just like a simple hack. Just write to somebody who doesn't get that many emails. You just want to,
Yeah.
and of course, this is true more in like, of course, I'm sure this is true for in other aspects, not being a hiring call also, but generally you want to increase the chances of success, you want lesser competition. So just go to the roads less people take, and that's just a small hack right there.
Yep. And you can always add pointers, like whenever you go and see the profiles of the folks who are currently working there, you can always try and understand, okay, what are the things they're working on, right? They might have written blog posts. Go and read those blog posts. Try to get some questions out of it. And then probably don't directly reach out for hiring, but you can reach out, okay, I found this interesting. How are you making this possible, right? That's good enough for you to land for a call, right? And then probably you can pitch yourself. So yeah.
Yeah, so on projects, we have a question from Krishna. He's sort of describing the chicken and egg problem. That what do you do if you're a beginner and you don't have any projects as of now?
Krishna, as I said before, right? If you're applying to a startup, there always are problems, right? And there will always be a problem. You just need to figure out where you can add the value in, and reach out to them. If you're reaching out, if you do not have enough experience, you can always reach out for an intern position, right? Even if there are not open intern positions, I'm pretty sure that if you kind of reach out in a way where you can show the recruiter or the founder or anyone in the team that you can add value, they would be very open to take you as an intern. So 100%. You should always do that. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's also an addition to that of course it's a classic problem that you need experience for an entry level job. So I think projects is one way you can solve that problem. In the chicken and egg of your first job, you don't need somebody else to let you make a project. A project is something that is mostly self-driven. So especially when you're in a startup, especially when you're applying for a startup, you have to use the sort of opportunity where there is no control on what you make and there is no credentialing that is required to make a project. You can just make a project on your own. So in these times, I think it's even more important to like take a plunge and just do that project, even if you might not be as good, or even if you think that it might not be the best at reflecting your skills because you might be young or whatever. But I think it's just even more important to just go ahead and make the project. So I think that's just a project is a hack into the chicken and egg problem of job and experience.
True, true. I guess Priya also asked another question. I can probably read it out. It basically says, what does a startup look for in an intern apart from projects? As in, if they take an assessment, what are they likely to ask? So usually, if it's an engineering role, they usually have a small problem statement, or they could even share a problem on HackerRank or those kind of platforms, right? So yeah, usually those are the things which startups test for. What I have mostly seen in my experience and what we do at Clarisights is that we share a small problem statement where we try to not test on the output, but we try to test on the approach, right? So usually it does not matter if you got the problem solved or not, but it matters more if you were able to break down those problems and the approach which you took was right. That's what matters more.
Yes, we do something sort of
Basically,
similar at Devfolio too, where once you're through to the after the first stage, there's a 72-hour task shared with you, and because of course a lot of times now a lot of people are learning how to get their first foot inside the door with communication, like with clear communication, with all of these things. It's even we might make mistakes in figuring out in like get false positives in who's the right fit or not. So these sort of multiple steps sometimes become very necessary, especially when you have limited resources. So in the first 72-hour task, what we check is like I think it tends to be more towards the output end. And and if there are any if you think there are glitches, then we ask you, and then we ask you to solve it, take one more day and do it and figure it out. And that's where we see more of the process. And if you get through that part, then we do a pair programming sort of 1 hour, 2 hour interview where the main focus is the process, much more than the previous round. So I think it's always for us at least, it's always a mix of both. You have to do like the process as well as the output. So next is always make your links visible. So again, a relatively trivial point, but also seems to have outsized impact. Startups are always like people who are reading your resumes inside these companies are always triaging. They're always figuring out what is more important. They're jumping between tasks. They're like their hands are all over the place, and especially the person who's reading these things, because more often than not they also have another job to do apart from managing their team's hiring. So what you want to do is you want to optimize your email and make it as easy as them to see all your links. So what we personally ask for is we ask for your Devfolio profile link and your GitHub. And if you think your LinkedIn is necessary, do share that also. We don't really care for LinkedIn, but our GitHub is usually a must, especially and with links to any other project you've done. If I need to open a PDF CV in which there's a broken link of a GitHub and I need to copy paste the username into a URL bar, chances are that somebody's going to lose interest in the middle and they're going to move on. So doing everything right will now break down at this moment where they weren't for whatever reason able to actually see the thing that you wanted to show them. So just like the simplest thing you can do is just before your signature, when you're just signing off your name, put those 4 links again, even if you link them above in the top, even if they're in your resume, even if they're on your LinkedIn page, or even if they're on your personal portfolio. Just put your links. This is my Twitter, this is my Devfolio, this is my GitHub. Just that after we read it, it takes us a millisecond to just go onto that profile. So again, it's not too important, but it can have like important negative consequences.
Yeah, and I personally, from a recruiter perspective, right, the person also wants to get more and more context about the person the candidate, right, who is applying. So they usually, I personally try to get more and more context, try to understand what the person is talking about, what the person has worked on before. So usually check out their LinkedIn, even Twitter, even GitHub, right? GitHub is of course something which everyone checks, but I also go ahead and check if what are they talking about, are they active on Twitter or not. So that does not really affect your candidature, but it kind of has some positive impact, right? If you're talking about, if you're involved in the community, if you're talking about the similar things, it kind of have a positive impact. So it kind of can accelerate your hiring process.
Yeah, I think, yeah, so we're next at the, so what happens after the application? So, so again, this also sort of carry forward from the previous point. A lot of starters have the practice of replying personally to each email, and sometimes when you're replying to a hiring call, it's not usually possible because they've got like one application, like 10 applications per month for the last 5 months, and now they have 500 applications. So of course, it's not possible to personally reply to each. But either way, there are two things you have to make sure, like two information, like there are two data points that you should have clear if you've not gotten a reply, and not to like, of course, there are two impacts of this. So the two data points are what feedback they have, why were you rejected, and two, what problem, like figure out what specific insecurity they had with regard to hiring you. So what this does is, and this can have two impacts. One impact is you like it signals your curiosity and your actual willingness to improve to the same company. So if they're telling you their problem, if first they see you asking these questions, then they tell you about the problems, because once you ask a question, more often than not they're going to reply. So once they tell you these problems, you of course have like the last word in just justifying it or clarifying it if you think you have a proper reason. And if you do that, that can actually solve a lot of things for the startup, because now if they realize that this was a false negative and you're actually a fit, you can start going forward to the next step. And so that's one best case scenario for you and the company. But the other longer term benefit of this is that once you understand where you're lacking, once you understand what sort of problem, what sort of misfit problem there is, it helps you apply better to other startups, and not only in the form of applications, but also you got to see, you got to look at this as sort of a meter indicating what you have to focus on. So if they think that if you, and of course a lot of times what happens is the real problem the employer has is somewhere hidden between what they say is the problem. So of course you have to use your communication skills, you have to use your human skills to figure out what actually their insecurity is. Once you figure those things out, next step is totally up to you. You have to see if you can work on those things. If they think that you don't have enough experience, make a few side projects, do a similar sort of internship at some place and apply again if you're that into this specific internship. If it seems like the problem is with communication and they missed out on a lot of things in the application, make sure that the next mail, all the next mails you write that point forward, do not have that problem. These are like sort of, many of these things are pretty easy to solve. So, and you have to complete the feedback loop. So that's very important. Always, once they reject you, if they reject you, just put your hand back in and figure out how you can make your life easier going forward.
Yeah, and also just adding to that, sometimes people even forget to reply, right? And it's totally okay to follow up. And I personally feel that following up is a great skill. If you can continuously follow up, people might even feel bad about themselves and like reply you, right? So don't feel bad about following up. Keep following up until you get a reply, but nicely follow up. So there is also a way to follow up. So be nice about while you're following up, and because folks are always busy, right? So if you keep following up, I'm pretty sure that you'll get a reply too.
Yeah, so like again, sometimes this becomes sort of unintuitive, because how we, like how the world works is, एक बार तुम reject हो गए तो फिर then you don't want to take it forward. It's like you put up these walls of defense, like walls as defense mechanism, that okay, I just need to move on from this to something else. But that's usually not like this sort of unintuitive way in which this works. And even if you're not able to convert this after a first soft rejection, it's going to make your own life much more easier, like much easier after for every subsequent company. So if your aim is not just to get this company but to get a good startup job, then always try to put your hand back in.
Yep, absolutely. I guess Anshul asked a really good question. Anshul is asking, like, do startups take in consideration about how much time a candidate has worked in the last role, right? And Anshul, yes, I think every startup does that. And if you have a good enough reason of leaving your last company earlier, I think it's totally fine. It should not be a problem until and unless you have a good enough reason. And it could be about, you're not facing challenge enough. It could be about you don't find yourself as a culture fit there, but it has to have some action items out of it. That you actually tried to solve that problem internally, you tried to push for it, but again, it didn't happen, and hence you're looking out.
Yeah, so like at the core of that, at the core of this signal from time, is that on from the company side, on a cost benefit basis, it does like most of the times
Yeah.
an internship is something is internships evolved out of training. So it's in a way the company is investing in you, hoping to find a great engineer out of you and hire you right off the bat once you're done with the internship. So they need to know that you're not a loose cannon who just bounces the moment their fascination with the new company or their enthusiasm with the new role is done. So of course a longer internship sort of gives this security to the company that whatever they do, you're a reliable person. And of course, the counter of that is that if you have a specific reason for why some internship was shorter than ideal, as Srijan said, always just make your case and fall within the exception and tell them why you're in that exception.
And I think usually it's most of the times it's for experienced folks rather than for the beginners or the fresh shoots. And like if you're applying for a senior or like for a role which needs you to have like at least a couple of years of experience or a year of experience, that's where people tend to look at your background and if you have stayed at a like at a longer for a longer duration of time or not. Keshav, Keshav asked about how can a CA be a part of a growing startup? What kind of roles would be ideal for CA? I don't think I'm the right person to answer this, Keshav, but I could give you like 2 cents. I guess there is a lot of finance work in a startup post they have raised funding. It could be around, taking care of the salaries, making sure that everything happens on time. There is a lot of accounting work, and usually what happens is that's outsourced. So if you could pitch in a way where you can tell them, okay, this is the way I could help you out, I think people would be very, very happy to take you on board.
Yeah, so I think I'm sort of relevant to this question. And I'm also a lawyer by education. So for these people who generally for like in professions like ours, tech and how startups work is not part of the normal course. So there's always a barrier, always a sort of a barrier to entry. Of course, hi Keshav, we can talk about this later in more detail. Also, I can just tell you a few tricks and hacks I used. But I think there are two ways to going about it. One, if you want to leverage your chartered accountancy experience in something allied like finance. So then, of course, there are a lot of fintech companies which will love your expertise. A lot of companies making, for example, if there's somebody making a tax solution software, there's companies like ClearTax. So basically, if you want to enter through an allied field like finance or deal structuring, or you want to use your CS background to focus on compliance. So that's one route where you get in through an allied field. And two, if you want to continue being a CA and work with startups as a CA, that's obviously that's obviously a harder part. It's always harder to do that. But speaking from experience, it's a big opportunity because most traditional CAs don't have this sort of inclination. So I think I'll hit you up later after this, and I'll just tell you how, like, what problems this specific market has. I think it's might not be relevant for most people, so I think we can just segue into this later.
Sarthak asked a question about what should be an ideal duration for an internship. So usually, Sarthak, at least I could tell from a Clarisights perspective, we tend to hire interns who are in their last year of college. So that, so our internships are usually for 6 months, where we basically, because it takes time for someone to be productive, right? It could take a couple of months for the person to understand the whole code base, right? Once and it needs a lot of effort from your fellow members to help you do that. And usually internships are about 6 months long, and it is also preferred that post internship you join them as a full time. So usually that's the intention of hiring an intern, that okay, you train them in those 3, 4, 6 months, and once they're productive they can be full time and they can help you out more.
There's one more question. I think you're going to be more you're like a better fit for this question. So the question is from Anshul: how to negotiate? Should we tell the startup about our previous compensation?
Actually, it depends. It totally depends. So how I could say from my personal experience, how usually companies do compensation like good companies, or in an ideal world, companies would do compensation on based on two factors. One would be what is the value is the candidate putting in, and second, where their team members are. Right, based on those two levers are usually the compensation arrives at. And sometimes for early startups, it's kind of important also to understand your previous compensation, right? And the reason for that is to understand if you're taking enough risk, because everyone in an early stage startup is taking some kind of a risk, right? And it also helps for you to negotiate as well. And if you have good enough pointers on why you deserve a higher raise or higher options or something, I think most genuine people are happy to talk about it and talk on that. But I think what matters more is for you to be honest about it and trusting the company too. But again, it's something which I'm talking from an ideal perspective, which usually doesn't happen. So you need to figure out if the company you're applying to have that sort of environment or have that sort of culture, right? If the company is trying to exploit you, you can feel that, right? You are not made for that company. So it's a win-win situation for you too. Yeah.
Another question is, what get students in the first year do in terms of applying? So so again, this is a very specific part of the chicken and egg entire cycle. And of course, there are ways to break into these companies even when you're in your first year, and it's not easy. So of course, there are no general answers, but one thing you can do is figure out of all the things that they do, what has what is the gentlest learning curve? Like, what is something you can learn and just get your foot inside, because the specific intention you have in your first year, especially, you don't know what sort of engineer, like most people don't know what specific expertise they want to develop. What you want to do is you want to focus on learning by osmosis. You want to be there and learn from how things are working, how people are working. You want an insider perspective into how startups actually work. So just find whatever role you find, like just find whatever role or whatever problem or whatever part of the entire company which is the easiest to master. And it doesn't have to be even remotely related to what you think you want to do when you, like, in the coming years. So again, like something Srijan will also relate to, if you're somebody who has general smartness and you can figure out things and you're like a problem solver, then just, for example, you can just write to the chief of staff and say that I'll just help you close all these projects you're running, and I can help you with this is something I've done before. I did this in my school, so I have some idea of how this works. I can help you with sales. So a lot of roles are not as tough to master as front end, back end, architecture, stuff like that. So the easiest thing is to get your foot inside the door using these skills and using these allied skills. And sometimes they're not even allied, but they're just skills. Just get your foot in the door, and once your only job is to get in. Once you're in, you can tell them, yeah, I want to be a front end person. So whatever person you're working with will just say, okay, I'll just connect you to our front end team, and if there's anything, yes, of course, that's lower priority than other things which they can afford somebody to experiment and dabble with. They'll connect you. So I think, so after you get your first leg in, this is your second leg in. So then you can, so kabhi you have to go through the opposite route. You have to do unintuitive things to get in. And once you're in, then it only depends on your communication and how good you are in that first thing that helps you get into the second thing.
Another thing, right? Yeah. When you're in first year, I think there are also a lot of programs that you could be part of, right? You don't really need to apply to an internship, like a startup internship, right? There are programs, like if you are from engineering background, there are programs like Google Summer of Code, which give you so much experience working with developers around the world. So you kind of like create your own network. So that's something I really tell folks to do, like GSOC, then Outreachy, and a lot of open source programs have their internal open source programs. Like open source organizations have their own programs too. So you should surely apply to there. That kind of opens a lot of more opportunities for you.
A question from Harsh is, how important is competitive programming in terms of applying for a job or internship at a startup? So so we're sort of, at least from Devfolio's side, we're sort of biased because we're always on the more hackathon side of things. So I think I'll let you take this, Srijan.
Sure. I think CP is a great skill to have. I think problem solving is an amazing skill, which when I was in college, I clearly lacked. But I think when you join, when you start doing real stuff, and then like I think CP is really helpful when you are doing algorithmic stuff in your startup. For example, in Clarisights, we have some departments where we actually do core technical stuff where algorithms, data structures are really, really important, right? So you can clearly have an impact there. But again, while you're reaching out, you make sure that your profile is relevant enough to them, and it kind of helps there. Like you should apply if you are into CP, you should apply on ICPC and get into this competitive. Having great ranks there is a great thing on your resume. But again, I would suggest you to also look into from a different perspective of building things, right? Having experience in both the things have larger impact than just having a competitive experience or just having a builder experience. I think both of them are necessary when you are applying to a startup.
Yeah. Next question is, we'll just circle back to your question, Aman. Before that, simpler question. As a first year student, should I focus on freelancing or applying for internships?
Interesting. I did both. I did some while I was in college, proper like doing semester. When also you have a lot of time, but usually it's harder to get internships because most of folks are not hiring. You kind of do freelance, right? You kind of work on smaller projects. You kind of get some money. Too, right? So it's always nice to do freelancing, but when you have a break, like you are in your summer break or your winter break, it's kind of it makes sense to do an internship and work from office, get that experience.
So I have sort of a different answer, different perspective on this question. The two things here. Of course, I'm assuming that this is your like as a part of your as a part of your first year. This is your first internship, so you don't have enough experience. You don't already have an internship to get the ideal internship you want. What's going to happen as a first year person is that like there are two things what will go wrong. One, companies don't want to hire first year people, so you end up going to the companies that do, or companies which have lower standards, and like that's just sometimes how it is. Or two, you're not good at identifying what companies are actually good and what companies are worth the 3-4 months you have off. So the problem with this is if you end up at a suboptimal, mediocre company, the work you do might not be great in itself compared to freelance projects, which you usually have full control over. So even if the client requirement is X, nothing stops you from doing X plus 5 for no extra money. And if you do it, you just, of course, you're going to get more money from most good clients. But what that does, it helps you give something. It gives you proof of work, which in your next semester you can show to startups saying that, I was in the first year, it was hard to apply for internships. I just grabbed whatever best project I could find, and this is the phenomenal job I did. And of course, to be able to say phenomenal job, you need to do a phenomenal job, and to do a phenomenal job, which is completely in your control. I think that's where freelance wins over a job where you have a structured requirement and where you have a structured role, where it just end up suboptimally sometimes.
Yeah. Agreed. And when you're in college, it's always you should talk to your seniors, not your just seniors. Talk to your seniors who are in your fourth year or who have passed out. Having that network, getting understanding their perspective, have personally helped me, and I think it really helps you too. It would really help you
out. Next question, again, non-tech perspective. What could a first year student work on from a non-tech background? So before Srijan takes this, I'll also put in a few lines here. So a startup, of course, usually defined as a new company that runs around technology and is high growth. But to keep it growing and to keep it running, there are multiple functions that go around it. It's not only tech. Not everybody is doing tech jobs all the time. And if there are only engineers in the company, that's even better, because somebody who is an engineer is doing these sort of side roles because there's nobody else to do it. So most very early stage startups will have people from tech backgrounds learning on the job all these non-tech sides. So this includes sales. This again, Srijan was just hiring for customer success. He might be able to tie in this with that question from Aman about what customer success looks like. With this customer success, there's operations. Like there's so many things that go on the ground. There's if you're again if you're from a legal side or if you're from a finance side, there's law and there's accounting and there's HR and there's recruiting. What is recruiting? After all, after basic information on tech, what you need is you need people skills to figure out how you need something that helps you judge people. So there are a lot of functions that go around the hardcore tech. And again, no general answers. Depending on your personality type, you can, of course, you can ping one of us one-to-one and we can help you. So we can sort of help you figure this out. But depending on what specific things you're good at, there's always a non-tech role available for you, regardless of your background.
True, and even if you're from a non-tech background, now you could still put effort in learning new things, right? You could build things from using tools like there are so many no-code tools, right? You don't really need to understand the nitty-gritties of how tech works, but you can still make things, build things, and that's a great point, right? You could always do that. So yeah, I think Neil answered it much better. There are always sections in a company like hiring, like admin stuff, like operations, customer success, where a non-tech person can help. But again, the context needs to be there and how you could add value. If you have that clear, I think you could totally make it in.
Yeah. So if you're doing if you're better at that specific non-tech thing compared to the current tech person who's doing it. So if you're both going to be learning it on the job, then there's no real reason to bring you in just to do the same kind of job. But you figure out what you're good at, what they require, and then see how you can do it better than everybody else. So it's just a low cost, very efficient way of getting into a company from a non-tech background. Srijan, do you want to tie into the customer success manager thing Aman talked about? I'll just read the question for you.
Sure. I actually read it. Okay. Aman, I think that's a really great question. And I think again, right, the job description of each role also kind of gives you a lot of idea of what the company wants from that person, right? And what I kind of feel, right, when you're applying for a role like customer success, where you need to understand your customers, the user, the more research you do on the company's current customers and if you could figure out ways what they're facing problems in, how Clarisights solving it, or Clarisights, how the company is solving it, it could also add a lot of value. You would get more and more insights on why they chose to use that product, right? So for at least customer facing role, you could even, go and if you know someone who works in that company, understand why they are using it, what is the kind of value that the product is putting into them. Talk to their users, talk to their customers, and see you can add more context when you're applying to that product or the company.
Question from Krishna: do certification programs from good organizations add value to a profile more than having a toy project?
Personally, I don't think so. I think if you build something that gives a higher value than any certificate could do or any degree could do, right? So I would suggest to go about building something new. For example, if you're doing about a data science certification course, right? So you could actually build projects where you're using those data science things, right? You can learn by online courses, and you can actually build out project which kind of shows that okay, you actually built it rather than just having a certification. To be honest, I don't think startups even now look even into degrees or even certification courses. I personally don't. It does not matter if you have a certification from Harvard or Stanford or even IIT.
Yeah, so what we're same, we don't focus too much on these certifications. It's important to understand what we're actually looking for. We're looking for people who can make things. And what's better proof of you knowing how to make things? One, you showing that you've learned how to make things, or two, you having made things. So of course, if you want to show the proof of work, because a lot of just compare school versus whatever certification we're doing right now, we learned a shit ton of things in school. We have certificates for all of those things. How many are things that we actually know that we still know these things? Not too many things, I'm guessing, for most people. Similarly, just a certificate only goes, it only does so much in showing that it shows that you're trying to learn, but it doesn't show that you actually learned those things. So the best way is to just, again, if you're taking it, I would never say that don't take courses. If you're taking courses, like Srijan said, show what you did with the learning of the course, because that's what you have to do at the internship also. You have to just apply your learnings to something. So just do that on your own time. Apply your learnings, make a project, and send that project. So the certificate will always have lesser value than what the certificate helps you with.
And you also need to stand out, right? There are a lot of folks who are applying for a lot of these roles, and a certificate does not really stand you out. What stands you out is that you actually build a product, build something, and if you build something and that is used by people, there is no better validation than that, right? So yeah, I would prefer building something over a certificate or over a degree any day.
Yeah, again, so because when you have users, that becomes so much more important, because like the classic Y Combinator thing, make something people want, and what if you actually make something and people actually use it? It tells us two things. One, that of course you can actually make it, and two, you understand people enough to figure out what needs to be made. Because like most often people focus too much on building, so building is a lot of times focus on too much, and what we forget is understanding what to build. Especially like a lot of companies, and especially at startups, again, we don't want oversight. We don't want people, we don't want to have to tell you all the time that this is what you have to do, this is what you have to do. So if you can figure out problems and see what solutions they require, you're much better than the rest of the lot right out of the bat. Any other questions? Anybody can just feel free to jump on.
If no questions, I just want to plug in that Clarisights is hiring. If you think you want to work at Clarisights, just shoot me an email. I'm at sa@clarisights.com. Got it. So yeah, I'll be very happy to help you guys out. And if you have any specific questions, you could always reach out one-on-one. I'll be very happy to schedule a call or help you out in any way I could.
Yes, and we're also hiring for a bunch of roles. People, I think there's already a link on the chat for the non-tech people here or the younger people here who are open to a stage where they can explore these non-tech roles. We're very urgently hiring for a sales and business development intern. So you just check that link out if you think you fit. Check that link out, and you can also see the rest of our job openings there. Okay, that's a new question. Anything for first year full stack developer?
Again, I think it has been taken up. I try to be part of hackathons, be part of like building projects, or try to contribute to open source. I think when you are in your first, second year, I think open source contributions really help you because you actually get to work with folks who are way experienced than you and are at like great companies. For example, if you're contributing to open source projects, you might already see that the folks who have contributed are at great companies. So that could also be a way to reach out to them. That, hey dude, I saw that you contributed to this project. I have also contributed to this project. Do you think we could chat, or do you think you can refer me for this role? So that's something you could always do.
So I'll also put in the link where we can see all the job openings we have at Devfolio.
Okay. I think Mihir meant it for our startups. Again, Mihir, as I said, right, we tend to hire interns usually in their last year of degree. And again, the reason for that is because we put a lot of efforts in making sure that the internship of that person is successful, and we want that person to be with us for a longer period of time. And that's the only reason. But again, we sometimes have hired interns in the past. So yeah, you can always reach out, and if it makes sense, we can figure out something.
Yeah, so I think the first step always is just to shoot out just enter into communication. So you never know what works out. They might have a open role that is not listed, and it turns out it's actually a fit. So as he said, if there's one thing that you take back from this talk and you have some great side projects, just Our Twitter IDs are already there. Just shoot it out to us.
Yeah. And I'll be again very happy to introduce you to folks, even if you don't make a class size. I think like not only mine, I guess folks in this call like Shakti and the folks at Devfolio have their own network where they would be able to help you out, right? So it's always important to reach out, making that first step, and I think things can be figured out post that.
Yeah. So if you just start, things just start getting easier. So just never think too much about applying. So it's like again, that's sort of antithetical to what we all went through here. That you have to like there's specific ways in which you have to do these things. But sometimes when you're in a tricky situation, it makes more sense to just do those things. So always is again no general answers. You have to figure out what route works best for you in this in whatever pickle you're in right now. So yeah, I think that's it. If there's any, I think me and Srijan are here for like 10 more minutes. If there's any other question you want to ask privately, we're just waiting here.
Yep.
I think that's pretty much it on the more formal side of the talk.
Yeah, and thank you for joining, guys. I never expected that 30 folks would join. I thought it would be only me and Neil talking to each other. Thanks for joining and thanks for listening to us. Yeah.
Yeah. And if there's anything else you need to communicate privately to both of us, just feel free to throw in a private chat on Zoom or just reach out on Twitter. I think Srijan's also here for 10 more minutes, so we'll obviously check these messages right now.
Okay, I see a lot of folks from White Whips. Can someone tell me what is it? Hey, you are on mute, Neil.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's a community on Twitter. Oh, nice. You have a fancy house, Neil.
Please, yeah.
AC in the background, books. You can have your own photo in that wall.
Again, at the risk of repetition, there's any private question you have, if you just want to talk informally, just jump on.
It was a good session, Neil and Srijan.
Thank you, Shakti. How are you doing?
All good.